Okay, we are live. How exciting. So, oh, just double checking. Great. We are good to go. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Marsom. Welcome to hashtag Dismantle Preservations. Let's keep talking session specifically on how to support emerging professionals, which has been supported thanks to Indo Windows, which is a wonderful interior storm window company that has done a lot of support of emerging professionals over the past few years, including the Windows zine, which has been a really fun project to see come from them. We're going to start with just an introduction of our panelists today. They're from literally coast to coast, and I'm really excited that they're here with us right now. So we're going to start with Decca and then move through alphabetically.
Well, hi, I am Decca Hussein Wetzel. I'm an architectural historian based in Cincinnati, Ohio. I work for a company called Gray and Pape, and we do cultural heritage management. But I've worked in the field and kind of been an emerging professional for what feels like a few years now. And one thing that helped me out through my time in learning has been being awarded the National Trust Diversity Scholarship. That really helped me get my networking going and really kind of getting me in that position to actually have some good support systems.
And I'm Christina Damshin-Spina, the VP of Marketing for Indo. We are connected to emerging professionals as we just completed 2 interns working with us over the summer through an Emerging Leaders program in Portland. That is a grant-assisted program, although one of the interns got a 2-month extension that was funded by us.
My name is Sarah Dickey. I am the Associate Director of Operations at a nonprofit called More Than Words, and we're located in Waltham, Massachusetts. We have another branch in Boston, Massachusetts. And so we're a nonprofit social enterprise that empowers young adults 16 to 24 to take charge of their lives by taking charge of a business. We work with young people who are homeless, out of school, in the foster care system, or court involved. And in a nutshell, we resell books and textiles online. And so through running these businesses, our young adult employees learn transferable job skills and life skills.
Awesome. And my name is Salem Wither-Casper, and I am a historic preservationist and heritage conservationist, and I currently work for the City of Austin's Heritage Tourism Division. I am also a former National Trust Diversity Scholar. I received their Mildred Kolodny Scholarship a few years back ago. I'm also a former Preservation Scholars Program, which is the Texas Historical Commission's and Friends of the Texas Historical Commission diversity scholarship for individuals of cultural or ethnic groups, and have served at various roles in my former job with the National Trust with the Diversity Scholarship Program, and have sat on a few boards for scholarships and fellowships. So really excited to be here.
Thank you, everyone. And I'm Sarah Marsom, your host for today. I did a variety of internships during undergrad and graduate school, including a 1-year fellowship with the Department of Transportation in Michigan. And I'm happy for the past few years, I gave out tiny scholarships to people with big dreams as a part of the Tiny Activist Project. But that pivoted this year to dismantle preservation. So this is going to be kind of a facilitated conversation. Feel free to leave comments in the chat on YouTube, but let's start with, what does supporting emerging professionals mean to you, specifically in the context of nonprofit and cultural resource work? And any of you can just kick this off. Christina, I'll start with you.
Well, we are a for-profit organization, so we have a slightly different perspective, but we have a nonprofit mentality of helping the community and being a sustainable organization. And I think that, there's a lot of value in seeing what the youth can bring to your organization, no matter what business structure it's in. Because this younger perspective is really important. How do you grow? How do you evolve? So just being open to hiring younger individuals and listening to how you can best support them, both financially and within their professional career.
We're at More Than Words, we're not in the world of preservation. We have like a historically preserved building at our Boston site, but we really are focused on workforce development and like what you were saying, Christina, is like really supporting young people in growth and learning and leadership and figuring out what they want to do with their lives. At More Than Words, we really believe work works, like giving a young person a reason to get up in the morning, to earn a paycheck, to come in, have a purpose, has been really, really important. We provide a really supportive environment where young people get feedback each day. They're pushed to be really great and push themselves to, you know, learn new things in a safe environment. And we're there if they slip and fall. We also think that preparing young professionals is a lot of like life essentials. We work with marginalized populations. And so like a transportation plan, housing, banking, saving money, things like that. Like some of the stuff that like some of us, including me, take for granted is we do a lot of that case management, making sure that they have those life essentials in place so they can actually come to a job reliably.
Yeah, and for me, I really just think that it's about cultivating our future movement, allowing us to just stop and pause and reevaluate where we've gone wrong, where we can go, you know, from this point moving forward. So along with empowering and supporting new and emerging professionals, I also feel like that it's a way that we can help influence the future of our movement and help to impact careers for these individuals, and as well, you know, even have them in pipeline for potential staff recruitment.
Yeah, I would just echo a lot of what everybody said here, because it is very important for people to have these opportunities to grow. So whether that just lets them have the learning opportunity now, and then they can translate that later to their professional environments, I think that's all just really important for people to be, you know, keeping in mind that whether you're interning or working as a volunteer, it's a stepping stone.
That's great. So looking at our existing tools of how we support emerging professionals currently, we have scholarships for school and conferences, we have fellowships, we have internships, we have workforce training. How can we develop these existing tools to expand the types of workers who are wanting to enter the cultural resource field, thinking age, gender, race, educational background?
Well, I also sit on the board of a group called Latinos in Heritage Conservation. And for us, because we are what you would consider an affinity group, it was really important for us to begin doing scholarships for our conference so that we could help support these emerging professionals that are currently either registered as undergraduate or graduate students, to help support them throughout their process and let them build their own community and let them know that we're here. But as an organization, we're just a group of these fervent volunteers, but we commit to fundraising, even though that is something that we're just beginning to do for our own organization. But we're so committed to it that we have for the last two conferences, and we'll continue on in our next conference as well. And I also think that just as a former diversity scholar with the National Trust and employee, and having been part of the selection process for incoming diversity scholars, I think that that conference experience is so critical as well for developing your professional network. So while it is definitely an educational, developmental program, it also helps to provide a type of connection for these individuals that are coming from various backgrounds and helping them in their own career development in the future.
Yeah, I really think that there's a lot to unpack there when it comes to conferences and the different things that people have access to. I find that kind of what goes together, conferences, professional papers, and kind of research reports, and these things that you kind of have to access by having a membership can be really tricky. And I think that there is an opportunity for these places to find a way to include and be more inclusive, and kind of financially think that, you know, just because you graduated from a program 3 years ago doesn't mean you're making great money, and maybe you know, could use the community or like the student rated discount, which I'm like, okay, if I was still a student, this is a great opportunity. I'll definitely, you know, be a member to all these organizations, but it's really hard to be when limited access.
That's a great point about how we even create barriers before you can apply for a lot of these opportunities. I was looking at the Society of Architectural Historians fellowships recently, and they lowered the membership rate after I looked, but you had to be a member, and it cost over $100 to be a member just to apply for the fellowship. And I'm like, is it worth spending $100 on a lottery ticket essentially? I don't know. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think that you really have to spend effort having a diversity of spots that you're showing these applications. If you traditionally maybe only posted it in one spot, let's say a government site or a organization's website, how do you go beyond that to attract new talent? So that means trying out some new job posting boards, maybe trying a new event that's free and open to the public, maybe even going to schools. If you have referral programs where you might be asking your staff to recommend people, know that they're going to recommend people from their circles. So you're not opening diversity up as much. So really try and expand how you're recruiting people.
I've been sitting still too long. We specifically, we have a very diverse youth employment pool. So we, specifically work with marginalized populations and of all types of diversity. And so like we talk about diversity on and off the floor with youth, with staff in casual ways, in formal ways, as an adult team. You know, we talk about these things all the time. And our youth are really prepared for their next job when they leave here. What is harder for our young people is finding fulfilling like careers after More Than Words that have benefits, that pay well, that like allow them to move up in the organization. And like for a lot of the young people that we work with, not like working for free is not an option. They need to pay an income. They support their families. They help pay the bills in their households. And so unpaid opportunities are not really an option for them. So scholarships and paid training experiences are really important. And we pay, I think we are going to talk about this later too. We pay our young people for everything that they do with us. So we really think that giving them paid opportunities so that they can move their lives forward while they're learning something is really important. It's built into our model.
It's really important for, I think, these conversations to continually reinforce that unpaid opportunities benefit the few versus the many, and it's all dependent on an individual's connections or support systems that they have. So, but you touched on some things that segue really nicely into how do we determine success for these programs, whether you're the facilitator or the recipient of the program. What does success look like, and how do you think we can best set up success for all parties involved so that when this short-term opportunity concludes?
Well, to me, it's, and Sarah, pardon me, just kind of touched on it. To me, it's, all about equity, access, and opportunity. And what that may be financial equity, racial equity. But I really think that a successful program is going to be a very inclusive and equitable program from beginning to end. And then also one that provides some type of connector even after that experience. So whether it's a conference experience or it's an internship experience, I think that that's a really smart way to do it. So, you know, even if it were like a mentorship type of program or a connection, the Texas Historical Commission is currently, for former alumni, is creating an alumni group. So it, you know, I was an intern with them, oh goodness, many years ago. And it's just going to be so wonderful for me to connect with new incoming professionals. And I just really feel like it's a really full circle approach. So I would say that for sure it's that equitable programming through the process and after the process as well.
I had an interesting experience in my graduate school where I had to take an internship, but the whole process was facilitated by an internship coordinator at the university. So it really gave us a good idea of how to manage and make the most out of this really interesting opportunity that we have, which is not just as a professional to like have a career, but the networks that you can create and the mentors that you can find. And so I interned with Cincinnati Preservation Association, and the head of that is Margot Warminski, who's like the preservation. She's like the person you want to be friends with here if you care about buildings and people. And there was so much I learned because they are a nonprofit, and today even, you know, I still talk to Margot and we keep in connection, and she's still, you know, at that head of that organization, the preservation department, and is doing just some amazing stuff. So I kind of am able to keep up with even the things that are going on here in the city that I might not have already been aware of. So then it just kind of expands all the networking opportunities that I have, and it's made it really like, you know, I felt that I've also had internship experiences in undergrad that were not as coordinated, and at the end of the day, I really got so much more out of my graduate school internships because of the organization.
That's a great point of needing a specific individual or person to be in charge of the intern versus a catch-all position who doesn't necessarily build a one-on-one relationship. Any other thoughts?
So if you have not had a paid internship previously, and you're trying to justify getting that into your budget, really making sure that your intern is compensated properly, make sure that you construct a good goal sheet. How can the intern help your business, nonprofit, organization really help achieve their financial goals? That may be that they increase your member base by some way through events. If it's on the architectural side, how can they help your team in a meaningful way? And make it really specific and metric driven. Because once the intern starts, you can sit down with them and collaborate on, are these goals appropriate and achievable? How can we relate them to your career goals? And then have something to track on a weekly basis with them for, are we, you know, in line with this? Do we need to be doing more in order to achieve these during the time that we have left? And the intern will feel satisfied that they help contribute something meaningful, and you'll feel justified for your budget that this was a good decision for you all.
I think the original question was just like, how do you measure success? And I mean, Christina, you're talking about like tangible, like measurable stuff more than words. Like if you need to, like the very basic information you need to know is like, we are so obsessed with data and tracking information and evaluating ourselves and evaluating the young people who are part of the program and like how they're doing. And so success for us looks like a young person graduating in 6 to 12 months. Like someone else said, this is like any experience is like just a stepping stone. This is not a long-term situation for the young employees that we hire. So measuring success is like them graduating. But like in the day-to-day, we have like this constant tension of our double bottom line. We're trying to like hit really real, like aggressive financial goals every day by like selling stuff online. But we're also meeting like a very vulnerable population and sometimes pretty unreliable workforce who have a lot of other things going on in their lives. So we're trying to hit goals with like a limited workforce, enforce policies and like teach job training skills, which means like I might have to enforce a policy that means you're suspended and now I don't have you on my shift today. So there's like this constant tension that we just like, it's just part of the, like, it's the nature of the beast, but like, that's what we do. So we have a lot of ways to measure success, but graduation is one of them.
It's a great point, Sarah, though, that your workers of varying skills and ages or whatever, all of them can help with your organizational goals. It's not just about giving an individual a line on their resume, it's about giving them real experiences that benefit you and them. That's really figuring out the balance. When I used to manage interns for the German Village Society, I'd always sit down and be like, here's our menu of projects that we're interested, which ones resonate with you and which ones will help you with your goals. Let's connect and figure out how we all connect together. I think there's a lot of value to tailoring the opportunities when available to your intern, your fellow, your workforce training. And even when we think about conference scholarships, right now, the National Trust for Historic Preservation has a call. It's still available. You can apply for their diversity scholarship to attend Pass Forward. They're looking for mentors and scholars or students. And, you know, I think thinking through that conference scenario, pair the right mentor with the right student. You know, you want to make sure that it's the right fit, not just a fit that kind of works just because you both filled out a form. So we've talked about unpaid. We've kind of danced around what compensation can or should look like. So supporting these individuals who are starting their career or considering to start a career, what does or what should organizations consider when they're thinking through stipend, hourly wage, honorarium? What are some things to think about? So I'll say, for me, when I was thinking of launching the Tiny Activist Scholarships, they were just $200 because when talking to people, you could get scholarships to pay for conference registration, or you could get scholarships for travel, but frequently there was kind of the last mile that they couldn't fund, you know, thinking of it from a transit perspective. So I thought I could help people with the last mile. And I'll admit, I'm completely rethinking the scholarship right now, but that's how I thought through that. So I'd love for people to think through, what should we be considering when we think about compensation as it plays a role in these opportunities?
For us, it's interesting because, yeah, there's some hidden bits in there, like you have to consider their wages versus a benefit, like a stipend, can work for your benefit on the organization, because that value might not hit company as much as when you add on payroll taxes and administration and all these other things. So there is some negotiation depending on what the rate that you want to pay the intern is. But then there's also that market value, going back to what you called out with, how does this internship program help your bottom line? How can they assist in core projects that you need to get completed? If you were to not call it an internship, but look at the work that they're doing, what is the most similar position that's out there, and what's the market value of that? How can you justify that your organization is actually saving a lot of money by bringing in someone that's less qualified than that position would be in the market, but they're able to do a lot of the same work or get trained in it? And then you can kind of sell that value in a different way. And if you are considering transitioning them to a longer term role within your organization, you're saving a lot of money in terms of training time versus if you hired someone at a lower level experience, you know, and brought them on. So you really can point this out and create a narrative, again, to justify having a budget. Because I do think that we need to be paying interns. It can make a lot of sense for your organization, and it's up to you to craft that narrative.
That's a really good point. I think that for me, as a person who's had internships that were unpaid, it to me as the employer should hopefully be thinking, you know, at the end of the day, these are people that are working hard to make ends meet anyway. So if you think of it from an equity perspective, and also like a social economic perspective, we really need to be considering that the people that are interns will be the people of the future. They'll be the professionals of the future, and starting them out where they're not getting paid anything is detrimental to their success, and it makes people have to work multiple jobs to make ends meet. It stresses people out and makes them feel like they don't even have time to maybe apply for paid jobs or take the opportunities that they want to further their you know, education or career. um, you know, these things really stifle us as humans, and then on top of that, there is a what's the cost of living in this location, in this place, because most likely these people are paying rent somewhere, have bills to pay. We are people, and that's just what I want to say. That is like the most important thing in my mind. You know, kind of separate from the actual, you know, how do you make this happen for an organization?
Yeah, I think that's really true, and I absolutely agree. I feel like having even having the structure of an unpaid internship is an equity issue for individuals of marginalized groups, or you know, like myself. I'm a first generation Mexican American. I paid for my undergrad, I paid for my graduate, and I did not have the luxury to have the opportunity to have an unpaid internship. So had I not have, and I had mentioned this before, but it was a full-time job trying to find internships that paid. And thankfully, the two that I mentioned previously were paid. But even looking locally was not an option for me. And I think that having that level and that type of unpaid structure um, does not open up opportunities for individuals that don't have that option. But it also, the organization business misses out on a diverse perspective and a different type of voice, a different type of individual that's going to have all of these great contributions and a bright mind to contribute. So I think that there's a loss on both sides to it.
Our structure, like our model as a nonprofit social enterprise, like assumes that we're paying you. I mean, like it's just part of it. Like we like paying our young people an hourly wage is just part of our budget. And the way that we're set up, the nonprofit or the social enterprise piece of it, the revenue that we bring in from selling books and textiles is enough to pay our young people. So it's about 50% of our budget comes from the revenue of the work, you know, from the work that they do, putting books on shelves every day. And the rest of the money from our budget comes from philanthropy and from government funding. So we don't depend, we're never intending to be 100% self-sufficient with the social enterprise, but like paying the youth employees is part of the model. And it's also some leverage that we get to use too, because they're paid for everything that they do, whether it's an on-site shift like scanning and shelving books and shipping out orders, or if it's right now, if it's a remote workshop where they're doing a team meeting or they're doing a youth development workshop, learning about self-care, learning how to budget, learning other things remotely, they're paid for all of that. And then we have consequences, you know, if you're late too many times or you call out too many times or whatever, you can get suspended from operation shifts, which means you're not allowed on site and you're not able to earn that money that you would get from being there. And so you're feeling a financial loss too. So in a way, it's another training tool that we get to use of like, there's an actual financial consequence if you're not being a reliable employee.
So we have to treat these opportunities from the lens of we're giving them to real people. We're giving them to people who have bills to pay, who are developing an understanding of what their self-worth is as it ties to a financial lens. We're really having to think through this all from that perspective. And I love, Sarah, that you brought up how you fund these. This is a really important part of this conversation. How do we fund these opportunities? Because that's the number one question probably that anybody who talks about scholarships, internships, et cetera. Well, I don't have the money. I don't have the budget. The question is, well, what are some types of opportunities that can fund these? And I'd love, Christina, if you could just talk a bit about your partnership with the city of Portland, because I know Detroit has a program like this, a variety of cities across the country have programs like this. In addition to, we should all encourage people to look for grants and private donations.
Yeah, definitely check out the organization's website, emergingleaderspdx.org, and their parent organization, which is called The Contingent. I think it's fascinating what they've been doing. It goes beyond just setting up these internships, which they have two divisions. One is for internships that are funded by companies, and then they have another one that is funded through grants that the city provides, a sector called Prosper Portland. And the process is really good. They have a huge day at the University of Oregon where people from all over come in, and they have kind of a mock interview day, and they're required to be there and participate because they want to see people who are showing a commitment to doing this. And they get put into different categories of interests, and they have a group of volunteers that helps match them to job descriptions and organizations based on the interest. So each employer is given 3 candidates to choose from, and they'll interview and select their candidate from there. During the whole process, the Emerging Leaders program provided resources for not only working successfully with an intern, but when COVID hit and they knew more people were going to be remote, they sent out remote specific resources, and they conducted surveys. I thought that was super helpful. Halfway through, they surveyed us and surveyed the intern, and then showed the results and said, this is where you guys have some disconnect. Why don't you guys talk about it? So I think it was great to have that organization involved. If you don't have anything like that in your city, it's worthwhile to look at their best practices and learn from that. It's not a heavy lift to implement those kind of things within your own organization.
Yeah, so I mean, we have city programs that are available across the country. Universities frequently will help pay at least a portion. Many states across the country have Americorps positions specifically tied to historic sites, and they help match your funds if you're looking for entry-level staff through that. There are a myriad of funding opportunities. Does anybody else want to touch on where people should be looking to help create financial structures tied to these? All right.
I also want to mention that the National Trust for Historic Preservation also has Hope Crew, which is a job skills training program for the trades. And similar to a lot of these programs that we were talking about earlier, they work with youth and military, HBCUs, and it is all about evolving and training that next generation. And it's also multi-generational, which I think is a really great experience for everyone.
I love that. We don't have to just be looking at college age kids and looking at them as emerging professionals. People enter cultural resources as a second career, or heck, we definitely need to be getting those high schoolers interested in nonprofits and museums and everything else. So as we reflect on shifting conversations in regards to what the cultural resources field can or should look like, combined with the current state of the world, what pivots do you think these programs should be considering?
We had to go through a major pivot with moving to remote. I just heard yesterday that JP Morgan came out with saying remote work has caused a creative combustion and we're asking people to come back into the office. And I thought, well, that's really deflecting accountability there. If you're responsible for company culture or organization culture in a workplace setting, then you're also responsible in a remote setting. So I'm sure many of you are going to be continuing some aspect of remote work, and you have to put in effort to do that. We experienced that within our own intern program. We did a pretty good job within our department, but when someone's not able to kind of see people outside their more immediate group or team work on a daily basis, you're really losing something. And we actually saw this across the whole company when we surveyed our staff. There were people that felt pretty connected to their more immediate team, but very much so disconnected from anyone outside their department or team. So you have to find ways to engage with them more and provide them resources, because especially as someone who's an emerging leader, they need to network, they need to have conversations, they need to practice public speaking. So how are you encouraging that to make them feel like they're part of the team? When you do that, they'll truly feel motivated in what they're doing, they'll make better progress in their careers. And I think that your company or organization will start seeing the results a lot more clearly if you get that cultural piece in place with this remote construction.
Any other thoughts about pandemic pivots or the revolution happening and the great awakening of people realizing diversity and equity is a part of cultural resources and how that impacts our opportunities?
Yeah, I definitely feel that that's a really big part of it. Diversity, also just recognizing that there are different kinds of people. Because like, for example, if you're doing more of a trade or field work type of type of project as an intern, you might be in certain communities that you're unfamiliar with, different kinds of people that you're unfamiliar with, that are unfamiliar with you, which is more what happens, I think. And people wearing masks out there. As a dark skinned person, I just know that it doesn't, it's not conveyed as I'm just here as like a regular worker, and I'm just employed, professional here. I'm not, intruding on someone's area. And I think that's one part of diversity needs to be like seen as something that is just our reality. And the other part is the opportunities that we need as people of color are for people to be thinking about us as a marginalized group. So when it comes to women, people of color, LGBTQ, we are all minorities, and sometimes that can get in the way of so like being more marginalized and maybe having less income can really restrict you from gaining the success that you want to gain. And I think that it's just important for organizations and nonprofits to try to keep that in mind when they're thinking about employing people and really that paying them. And that's kind of where I'm getting to, and it's coming back to, you want to be monetarily making people feel rewarded as well as make them feel comfortable where they're at.
Yeah, I totally agree. I also feel like for individuals from BIPOC communities, oftentimes it can, this process of being an intern, being in a brand new situation amongst individuals that have been in the field for 20 years, and that can be very scary and isolating. Sometimes we have to move from our hometown out of state. And that having that recognition and understanding and space for that in your own program, I think is really, really important. And just understanding that this is an individual, a human that has left what they know to come and have this type of professional development through this internship program. So if you can build in types of support systems, and whether that is something like a group pairing, I think that that's really important. Over the years with my interns, I've encouraged them to adopt a similar practice that I had when I was an intern, which was having a go-to person that was my cohort within the internship program, but then also a professional in the organization. So someone outside of me that they could be connect to and could be their confidant, that could be their individual, and having that support system. And I found over the years that it's worked for them. And just having those types of considerations, I think, can really help making someone feel like they are not alone, they're not isolated. But then also going back to the global pandemic thing, that also can be isolating as well. I just, starting a new job during a global pandemic for me has been an eye opener. And as I was thinking on this panel, I was wondering about all of the great interns that are out there this summer having to go through this process, and thinking about ways that you can strengthen those type of relationships, create community building opportunities, even through a virtual scenario. But it'll be something that if we carry this on throughout next summer, that I think we're going to learn from our errors the first time around, and hopefully be able to create these community structures that will help support them and help us think more creatively about the programming and support systems that we have for our interns.
Great point of how do we set people up so that they don't feel like an island, both in the virtual sense, but also if we are hiring a BIPOC staff member for a predominantly white workplace, how do we make people feel like they aren't isolated, but also feel like maybe when we are having these more frequent conversations on diversity of equity, that we're not leaning too heavily on this emerging professional. Sarah, Christina, any thoughts on how, with the programs you've managed, how to find that balance?
Talking about like being inclusive, but not leaning on the people of color to be leading us. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, especially because it's especially tough for, I think, an emerging professional to feel confident in their voice. And then when you lean too heavy, they can just crumble. Yeah, so I can only speak to what we're doing here. And I would say like that our organization has been making strides in diversity and inclusion for several years now, and we've come a long way. We have a long way to go, but we've done a couple of things internally that have been helpful. And so like I said before, we're like very data and numbers driven and goals driven, and we have a lot of accountability pieces. And so we tied really tangible goals to like the changes that we wanted to make. So for example, like we want to increase our board to be at least 25% people of color, and we've surpassed that. And we had a deadline for that. And we have site advisory committees. So on each, Boston and Waltham has a site advisory committee that advises the site director. And so in each of those groups, we want them to have at least 50%, more than 50% people of color. And so we have like these really tangible, measurable goals, and then we talk about them and we report back on them periodically at like staff retreats. Like, how are we doing? Where do we need to keep pushing and keep going? So I think having like tangible numbers tied to stuff really is helpful. And like I said, we still have some ways to go, but like that's a starting point. And then internally, we have a race equity and inclusion team, and it's a voluntary, it's like selected of the people. It's they call themselves a ragtag crew of people because no one's like the expert, but they're like learning and growing together. And then they present lunch and learns and different workshops for the rest of the team for us to participate in. And then recently we've hired a chief equity officer or chief equity coach. So it was someone we were working with
in a different capacity before, but is now part of our payroll and part of our staff and is in a lot of our meetings. So like, I think by including, like just by hiring more people of color and more diverse staff, like, I think like that's where the conversations can start happening. If you're an all white organization, it's a lot more difficult. It's a lot more difficult because then you're going to lean on the very few people that you have. So I think we acknowledge where our shortcomings were, and we have made efforts, tangible, measurable efforts to change and improve.
I want to just say that, like, you know, if you're working in an area with mostly white folks and you come in as a person of color, you're aware of that. Like, it's not something that you don't notice. So, so I just think that's important for people to be thinking about.
We had some direct experience with this. So as I mentioned, we had 2 interns over the summer. One of the first ones that we had worked with had expressed interest in social justice. And so we opened up a few conversations with her about, hey, this is kind of our situation in the workplace. Like, you know, we were wondering about these areas, just trying to get her perspective. And it came back later that this really put a lot of pressure on her that made her feel uncomfortable. And so it definitely reframed what we needed to do. And I went to our executive board and I said, look, we have to fix this issue. I think we should go ahead and open up a diversity, equality, and inclusion committee so we can educate ourselves on an organization as to how are we doing compared to baselines in our city, and how can we construct goals around what we can do to address those things. And it is tricky, particularly for profit organizations where, you know, I wish that we could do some things like set goals around what does our demographic breakdown look like. There are some areas within that that are contested because that means that you're hiring based on race, which is not something that we can do. So it's been a process of saying, these are the things that we are willing to do and put goals towards as an organization and developing our culture and providing inclusion and conversation that doesn't weigh on any particular group, but celebrates the diversity that we have when we do have it. And so that's all been very recent, but I can already see the effects across our organization of people appreciating everyone's different facets, you know, whether it be race, gender, sexual orientation. I do think it strengthens the culture if you put that time and attention to it.
I would also want to echo, like, having the conversation. It's just so important. Just have the conversation. While I think that people of color might not, like, I don't feel that these conversations are hard to have. I don't feel uncomfortable with them. It's maybe more so on the other side. So, you know, for me as a person of color, if all I'm asking is for the conversation to happen, it would be nice for people to start to realize that, you know, this is America. It is, like, this is a difficult conversation to have, talking about racial issues. So why are we going to continue to pretend it doesn't exist and ignore it and try to pretend like if we keep going, everything's going to be okay? Because it's really not. And it hasn't been for a long time for people of color. And really, as a historian, as a cultural resource specialist, people who look into this, I mean, I look into a lot of archival history, read a lot of newspapers, and come across things like, you know, insane racial issues that have happened in communities in like Springfield, Ohio, for example, where there were 2 crazy riots in 1904 and 1906 that, like, pushed out the Black communities there. And, you know, that's eye-opening to me. I didn't know that. I'm a first-generation American as well. So my parents didn't really grow up as African Americans in America. And I'm growing up with the repercussions of what America's, like, vicious history has done to my ability to gain equity and success. So navigating all these things is really tricky for me. And sometimes I just wish my, you know, white compadres could start to see that, yeah, I get it. It's really tricky for you. And if it helps for me to just talk about it, then why not?
We keep coming back to needing to be intentional with our goal setting, both for the host and the participant, being intentional with having conversations to ensure that the person, the emerging professional we're wanting to assist is feeling supported, that there needs to be a lot of intention and strategy to do what we're doing. It's not just about throwing spaghetti on the wall and seeing what sticks, and hopefully that person will stick with historic preservation or whatever it is. A part of this conversation has, or the broader conversation in cultural resources, how do we encourage more people to pursue these opportunities for emerging professionals that exist? I'm thinking of a specific statewide preservation conference that never fills all of their spots for their conference scholarship. And while the pandemic is very difficult and there are some hurdles to make virtual work, I think it also could potentially open us up to reaching more people who may not be that history major or whatnot. So thinking through, how do we encourage organizations, whether they're a local nonprofit or a corporation or whatever, how do we encourage, or what do we suggest for them to expand their applicant pool? What are some specific tips to reaching a broader audience to expand who may want to be a cultural resource professional?
For me, just speaking from my own experience, I think it's a matter of widening our own pipelines. You know, if you are only continually posting these internship scholarship opportunities on the same boards, you're only going to get the same types of applicants in the exact same amount year over year. You can't fix something by doing the same thing that you've always been doing. You know, as far as learning about these scholarships, it wasn't something that it wasn't a resource that was handed to me by the universities that I went to. It was something that I on my own had to go out and seek. And that to me is even, you know, an access issue. So you know, in my role, when I did work for the National Trust, and my role now as I sit on the board for the Friends Group of the THC, make sure that I share these internship opportunities with networks of, you know, various heritage, cultural, BIPOC community groups. You know, those are the groups that are important to me, that we get those pool of candidates in order to be able to reevaluate, change this movement that we're in. So I really feel like, you know, being able to have opportunities and increase, you know, you're saying like being able to fill all of these seats of candidates for scholarships for a conference. In a situation like that, I think it sounds like that organization really needs to spread to the organizations that they're working with. And that pipeline will funnel through, and, you know, we'll be able to see a lot more applicants come in. And I also feel that it's just also a matter of partnership building too, that we're not necessarily working with our community partners and the people out there in the field that are doing the real work. And those individuals, like those community mayors, the people that are doing that grassroots, those are the types of people too that we want to reach out to in spreading these types of opportunities.
I'll say that I found my internships by calling organizations that I thought were doing something interesting, and clearly not everybody's going to be that level of intense, but you're right. Like, a lot of people just don't even post them onto their website. They just post them on that one job board.
I'm with you, Sarah. I'm that crazy too. I've reached out to almost all of them. I had an internship at the United Nations in Nairobi because I like push forward on something like that, just from finding people that, you know, my family's from East Africa. So there happened to be people that I was able to connect to, but the networking is a big part of it.
So someone in our audience is asking this question, and so how can we turn opportunities from a short-term experience to a long-term benefit? Or are there thoughts on potential development over mentoree program? You know, like how do we expand something to have a longer lasting impact versus that one conference or that summer internship? And I know that falls a lot on also like the emerging professional being interested in it and having the gumption to sustain a relationship. Relationship sustaining is very tough.
Well, our organization is not, I mean, it's different than just an internship, right? So we have young people participating for 6 to 12 months in the core social enterprise. But then once they graduate, we follow up. We have a career services department and they stay in touch and do case management for young people for 2+ years, as long as the young people want to stay in touch with us. But we have a 2 years of like dedicated, like calling, reaching out, supporting resume reflection, doing mock interviews with them, preparing them for jobs. Oh, you need, you know, you lost your job. Let's see if we can find you another one. And like, oh, you're going through this experience. And especially during COVID, we were very much in touch with our community of former employees, grads, and then core social enterprise people. So, I mean, we have the structure. We have a whole department dedicated to following up with graduates. And so we have that support in there, and because like we're just this, again, a stepping stone, and like the next job might not go as planned. So we have structure set up to continue supporting young people as time goes on. And some young people stay in touch for many, many years. We're 16 years old. We have many young people who are still in touch with us.
Particularly for organizations, I think it's really important to cross-train people so that they have transferable skills that they can use in other jobs, hopefully. And so that we're talking about transitioning from short-term to long-term, the hope is that they can be kind of diverse enough to take on a number of different tasks that would have to maybe be done through a couple different people in a different position. So you go from intern to, you know, maybe a lead volunteer coordinator, but maybe that allows for some opportunities to do grant writing. And then that in turn helps the organization have the funding to keep your job. I was strategic in how I wanted to develop my graduate skills. So I got a master's in historic preservation, but I also have a master's certificate in nonprofit management. And so that went from teaching me funding, funding, fundraising, how to do grant writing, how to work with others and create, really help establish from beginning to end a nonprofit organization. So even with some smaller organizations that I know exist out there that might not have anybody as a permanent, don't have an executive director or permanent staff member, and I know people who are working on boards of preservation organizations that don't have that might want to end up, becoming a preservation professional and transitioning from what they were doing before, because they find that this preservation work is so important of tying in communities and the different kinds of people. So, how do you do that? Well, funding. And so just cross training and making sure everybody has a good amount of skills to help everybody out. If you work together, I think you can really create something great.
To all the established professionals out there who are watching today, it only takes 1 year of experience for you to be qualified to be a mentor to someone. So there's tons of organizations out there where you can sign up to be a mentor of an emerging leader. It takes you an hour a month max. In many cases, it could even be every other month if you're really strapped for time. But the benefit is you're going to learn a lot from the person that you're mentoring and their perspective. You're going to learn a lot about yourself and how you guide someone through their professional career. And you'll feel really fulfilled throughout this process by assisting grow your community and your professional ecosphere. And to any of the emerging leaders out there, you just heard from Sarah, everyone on this panel, they said, yeah, I went after these boards and I sought them out. It's the same thing for a mentorship. You have to go, I want to get a mentor. I need someone to help guide me through what I want to do in my career. So write out, you know, what qualities you really need in someone, and start asking people when you make a professional contact, do you know anyone who would be a good fit for a mentor? I'm looking for these things. You do have to be aggressive in it, but the community will support you if you show that interest.
Yes, absolutely. I definitely encourage individuals that are, emerging young professionals, those emerging just new into the field, make those connections. We are a happy, good, feel good field. We just are people. And I think there's so much value in whenever you have an experience and you have the summer internship, there is so much value to you networking within that own experience. Your job may be at this one desk to do this one task in this one job, but you have lunch opportunities, you have after work opportunities, you have various training opportunities within that, and make sure that you're, take space and make space, get there, meet people, make those connections. So I would say for sure, the connections that are of value, especially if you are working with a larger organization. Let individuals know, what's your research study? Like, what are you interested in? We want to know exactly what you're interested in, and don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to ask for an introduction. Especially if, I know it was very valuable to me during the time when I was focusing on my research. It was a very unresearched area, and making those types of connections during my internship was invaluable. And those were my cheerleaders following that experience, and it later turned into a job. So I think that there's a lot of value in just helping to build, the contributions that you're making while you're there, but also your self-esteem. And I would also say that as far as long-term goes, once you do transition, you get a job, I would just continue to encourage you to stay in contact with those individuals that you've made. Allow those opportunities to be lifelong friends, and support their work and allow them to support your work.
Life gets busy, but sending that email once a year, reaching out to whoever was your supervisor or whoever was your mentor for a limited term program, that's invaluable. I've stayed in touch with almost all of my internship supervisors. Just, they made an impact on my life, but also there's still people who are listed on my resume. So I want to make sure that they don't forget who I am. A couple simple things that I'd really encourage anybody who is either pursuing an internship or managing an internship or workforce training, make sure before you conclude the program that you two get together, supervisor and other individual, that you guys review your resume together, that you make sure that the job is appropriately described on the resume. And while I'm not great at doing them, I've recently learned of the value of doing LinkedIn, recommendations for people. You can go above and beyond to vouch for the person you were supporting, and then continuing to build that relationship and just become Facebook friends with them. That way you're in each other's universe regularly. I really love this question from Sarah. She was thinking, she says, would love to have a conversation about how we can support those who may not be recent grads, but who are making a mid-career pivot. With COVID, we may see more of these folks joining the ranks. So how do we think through these programs to ensure that they're not being ageist? How do we make sure people can pivot and enter the cultural resource field at any stage of life?
starts with fair pay. You know, that's how you can really make sure that no matter if they came in sooner or later, because if you have older individuals who are wanting to apply for an internship, they just got out of school, they could already have households and families. And so even if it's a, you know, just living wage, you'd be able to make sure that no matter what their status is, they can take that sort of internship.
I'd also say we should reconsider our application requirements. I'll pick on Preservation Action just because I'm friends with them. They require you to be a graduate student to get their advocacy scholarship to go lobby on the Hill with them every year. You know, that's a really big barrier to require somebody be in grad school. So I'd suggest that we just maybe potentially for internships and scholarships, just take away the academic requirement as a whole. We can, you know, still market to those audiences, but make it so that it's not necessarily a requirement. Any other thoughts or suggestions on how to make it so that we're age inclusive for career pivots?
Maybe just more so looking at people's, you know, the conversations that you have with people in like an interview or something. So, you know, looking at their resume and seeing that they only have this amount of experience doesn't necessarily convey that their enthusiasm and ambition and ability to actually do the job. I think that's something that's just, you know, really, really important to just don't overlook people because of what's on their resume. And I know a lot of times people like it's a long process, or they may have too many applicants, but you know, just don't look anyone over for not having had, you know, 2 years of experience in something. If it looks like they you know, have done a lot of similar work, then it might be worth having more people that you say, okay, we're going to interview more people, even though it's more work for the organization or the company.
Yeah, and I also think it's a matter of reframing that job opportunity, you know, whether it's an internship or that scholarship. I know whenever, you know, we had diversity scholars at the trust, it was a very multi-generational experience, you know, going to conference. There are individuals that are undergrads up to individuals that are recent retirees. And recognizing that and recognizing the value of that, I think is what makes that program so successful. So if you're looking at it at an organizational level, business level, looking at that internship opportunity, looking at their experience, and seeing what type of contributions this individual could make would be good. So not thinking about, it's an intern, I'm going to give them all of the grunt work. You know, I would allow that individual to play a large role, a big contributing role, you know, something a little bit more public facing with that type of experience. I think there's a lot of value to that. So to me, it would be a matter of reframing that program a little bit. And we're going to be seeing a lot of that, a lot of people recareering and coming into the workforce program. So, you know, it even could be like an internal evaluation of how it is that you structure these and making sure that you're being as inclusive of all age groups, all people as possible, and not necessarily tailoring it more towards an undergraduate coming, you know, 20-year-old coming into the program.
And we have a couple of examples of nonprofit organizations at least thinking through this. Landmarks Illinois hired someone within the past 12 months, but I remember in the job description, there was no mention about a specific degree requirement. It just, you know, said you had to have skills in Excel or something along those lines. So it really, they said it opened up the job pool and really led to helping them hire someone who was right for the position versus hiring somebody who had quote unquote the right degree. And I know Rethos, the former Minnesota Preservation Alliance, has also tried to steer away from having a very narrowly focused, quote unquote, right degree. Of course, this doesn't work in all types of preservation positions because you need to meet the Secretary of the Interior standards to complete certain work, but there is a lot of flexibility when we're looking at trades jobs, the more corporate work, looking at nonprofits, and even some positions in the private sector. So I think it's really worth thinking through how we do a job description to ensure everybody feels welcome to join in on the fun.
There's a really great tool out there, just to let you know, that shows how your language is gender biased. So you can even upload your job description and it will tell you if it's leaning male or female and what words are gender weighted. So definitely encourage you checking that out. You should be able to just Google that. It's a free tool.
That's great. I'll add it to the resource guide too. So that popped up on my Twitter the other day, which also brings me to when you all think about networking from the beginning of your career to now, what are some resources that you would encourage people to look at that maybe they may not think traditionally? We all think about you go to a conference to network, but obviously, while there is still network interactions at a digital conference, it's not quite the same if we're being honest. So what type of networking suggestions would you suggest to somebody who's either wants to find somebody they could mentor or offer themselves up as a mentor, or people who are looking to network? I'll say I'm not a huge Twitter person. Like, I don't tweet a ton, I retweet, but like I have found Twitter to be amazing for finding inspiring people that are just doing killer work. And I actually had a phone call with one last week who I just DM'd her and I was like, could I please learn more about your work? So what type of networking would you suggest people to pursue themselves or to suggest to someone that they're mentoring?
So I am a like, as you know, I'm in full support of individuals like exercising their right to network, and I would say if there is a particular type specific expertise that you're interested in, something that you're just learning about, want to know more about a particular author. I am still very old school, pick up the telephone and I call and just introduce myself, tell them what admirer I am of their job. And I've found that to be so successful, at least for me, in being able to make that human connection and learning, you know, as Sarah was just mentioning, learning about something new that I never knew about. But I also want to say that, you know, especially my graduate studies, you know, I reached out to a lot of really big thought leaders within historic preservation. And we had so many phone calls together, and the level of commitment that individuals in our field have to just the craft and the thought process within historic preservation is just so strong that individuals are a resource, but they're also, you know, it is networking, but it's also really a resource to your own professional development. So I would encourage you to pick up the phone and make those connections and allow these individuals to be your lifelong supporters and friends.
That's pretty much the best advice like anybody could give. That's exactly what I was thinking. And you know, if you find people who are interested in what you're interested in and you talk to them, who knows what will come out from it. It might not be something right away, but keep going. And whether that person is someone you decide that could be a mentor for you, or just a professional link or to network, you know, keep that open, keep facilitating that.
And this feels like a great time to remind everyone there is no magical unicorn mentor who can help you in all facets of your professional life. You know, all of us are on our own unique career trajectories. So, like we're saying, call anybody, you know, take tidbits of information from a variety of people, because that'll help shape your perspective and make it more rounded than if you leaned entirely on one individual. It's really worthwhile to just pick all the brains. So are there any, before we wrap up, like, are there any additional thoughts to programs that we haven't talked about? You know, we've talked a bit about scholarships, mostly on internships and workforce training, but what types of specific tips would you encourage to an organization that is looking to create a program to benefit more emerging professionals? What are like 1 or 2 tips that you'd give?
Asking questions to your like current staff. If you want to make something happen, you should definitely try to figure out where you're at, make sure there is room to grow, and you know, really just trying to make sure you do what kind of what Sarah was saying earlier about you know, tangible, like recorded information. You want to show that you're doing what you say you're going to do.
Christina?
I was also gonna,
No, go Sarah.
I was gonna say, I think there's such value in making people feel like they matter. We had to close our on-site programming for 4 months, so we didn't have young people in the building since March. They came back in July, and we just in the past 2 weeks brought on a new training round. And our format is that we start a new training cohort every month. And so there's people all in all sorts of parts of their journey at More Than Words when a new person comes on. And so as they're here, they move up through the program and they get promotion. We have performance reviews, and then there's promotions that are earned, and it's expected that they're moving up or out. And so we had this like hiatus of no new people in the building. And so we'd had a group of people in here since July, and they're in cohorts and all this. And we just got our brand new youth who joined, brand new. We were like so excited to get new faces in the building. And it was the highlight of my week last week, where we had a young person who just kind of comes in every day, just very la da da. We put him in, we put this young person in a leadership role to train one of these brand new people who don't know anything about what we do. And he was explaining things with such detail. And I was like, I didn't even know you knew all this. I was like, I didn't even know you knew all this stuff, because he just comes in and does his job and it's just kind of like da da da. And he's wonderful. But it was like giving him this opportunity to step up was so stinking beautiful. And so I think this is true, whether you're working with young people like we are, you're working with interns, like make them feel like they matter, like ask them their opinions, give them work. Like someone was saying, don't just give them the grunt work because they're the intern or the volunteer, right? Like, I mean, we all have to do grunt work, and I think it just has to get done sometimes, but like really asking the people what they want to learn, what they want to get out of it, making sure that they matter and they have a chance to have a voice and share what they know, that they can be an expert in some capacity. And it just was so refreshing. We've had to figure out how to bring new people in safely, how to bring the same people back safely. We have a lot of protocols in place, but it was just so refreshing getting to see someone step up and own something. And I think it's true for all of us, that when we're empowered, we just feel so confident and so wonderful. So just like no one at the organization should be small, and every person has value, and just making them feel that is so important. It goes a long way. And I feel like people remember that. Those are the people who stay in touch with us. Like we hear from them like years later. I'm like, oh yeah, how are you? Like, because they felt something when they were here. And so I think that's so important in any organization, is like making sure that people feel like they matter, especially during this time where community is really difficult.
That's a really great point. I've heard from a number of people, I'm sure we've all heard this, oh, they're like interns, I can't give them too much responsibility because maybe they had a bad experience with one intern. You know, I think it's really important to remember, keep giving people fresh chances. Everybody's different, and they should feel empowered and like they're part of the team, because you truly do your best work when you're not doing grunt work, when you're feeling like you're a part of the team.
I think the other bit, we've talked a lot about these positive things about goals, and the other component is if you're hiring someone or managing this program, take a moment to just go, how am I ignorant about things? Personally, I'm a white privileged person. So there's a lot of ignorance that I have in experiencing, someone of a different race, of a different sexual orientation. And then stating my desire to understand that a little bit more, especially in the context of a professional environment. And so if you list out these things and really admit that you might have some problem areas, you can collaborate on how to address those things. And also talking about your risks. What are you worried about? Are you concerned about, let's say, integrating someone properly within your culture, providing enough value of an internship? If you take the time to note those, you'll also be taking the time to mitigate those risks and find a better path.
I'd also like to just echo like one more thing, and it's just highlighting on all the things that we've said here, but make sure that you remember that really the point of an internship is for somebody to learn. So, regardless of, we're not talking about, pay or not, while yes, they should be paid, but really want to make sure they're learning something. And that's really why it's important to not give people grunt work or just be like, oh, I am paying them so then they can do whatever I need. And there's a balance. If things have to get done, they have to get done, but you can't just put it all on one person. And they need to be learning. That is the point.
Yeah, I would also encourage organizations to consider how well funded and resourced their effort is as they're beginning these programs. So are you actually putting dollars to help pay for these interns? Do you have a dedicated staff employee that oversees this program instead of throwing it to someone that is, has overburdened and we so much work that they just can't even imagine taking on an intern. Those are really important things, but I think it also goes to, as we were talking earlier, is making sure that the project that they're working on contributes to the organization, but also to their own career building. This is a resume builder, but it's also this experience is going to help them moving forward. And for my interns, that's something that I always consider, is thinking about what great work can they contribute that is going to help me push this project forward, but also going to help them and help them shine. And it's amazing what my interns have been able to come up with. I just very impressive work that, as a manager, we don't have the time or maybe don't have like the skill set, with technology or something, that I don't quite, understand. I don't know. But I really feel like just having an internal assessment of how it is that you're building these programs is so important. And again, just going back to where we were talking about making sure that you are paying them and allowing financial equity to exist within your program is so important.
I think it's just invaluable for us to be thinking about our missions as a part of this, our organizational missions. And, every organization has a mission, whether they're private, nonprofit, or government. And how do our support systems for emerging professionals fit into our mission and then our existing programming? I'm an organization that hosts a conference. Okay, it would make sense to put a scholarship in there versus creating a scholarship for an academic institution across the country. Or I want to write this grant for this specific African American cultural heritage area. Maybe I make sure in my budget, I have a budget for an intern. Or I've started to see in RFPs, request for proposals, people requiring there to be a workforce training element to get that contract from that organization. There's a lot of different ways you can think through to encourage support systems and internships and other opportunities. And think creatively, truly think creatively for how you fund these. You'll never know where you'll stumble on a bucket of money, but maybe it's by, you know, meeting with some students and learning that you need to do digital media and getting that digital media grant so that they can TikTok their way through old buildings. I don't know what it is, but just consider endless possibilities. Does anybody have any additional thoughts before we wrap this up? I've just really enjoyed this afternoon chat, and now I want to find a bucket of money to give all the students. All right, well, I really hope that anybody who watches this doesn't hesitate to reach out to any of our speakers. I'll make sure to have their contact information in this video description, and to remember to reach out to organizations and individuals to consider how to reevaluate your existing programs to ensure that you are meeting current needs for emerging professionals or other organizations who created programming that inspires you. We all need mentors, and regardless of what age we're at. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. I really enjoyed this time with you.
Thank you, Sarah. Bye, everyone.